The opinions expressed on the Simone Edwards Show by our guest are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of KEPXradio.com, its owner, and or the Simone Edwards Show and those affiliated with it. In no event will the Simone Edwards Show, KEPXradio.com, its owners, guests, hosts, or affiliates be liable for the information disseminated on the program, including, without limitation, any loss or damage, indirect or otherwise, arising from information presented on the show. We trust you are of legal age and will consult appropriate professionals prior to employing any opinions expressed on the show. Many of the topics discussed are personal in nature, and some people may disagree with the opinions expressed on the show. We are open to your constructive criticism and or ideas for future radio programs. Please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. All right, this is Simone of the Simone Edwards Show, and we are here live in studio with Kenneth and Adrienne of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries, and we are going to talk about everything that relates to love and marriage today. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the top 10 complaints about marriage. So for those of you who are ready to get married, but maybe you have some misconceptions about what you think marriage is all about, they are here to shatter those misconceptions and to get you on the right track when it comes to finding your soulmate and building a life with them. So we want to welcome Kenneth and Adrienne Neers. Say hello to the Neers.
Hello. Restless Nation out there. Good afternoon.
All right, KEPX Radio. We are here again in studio, and so we want to talk about, so let's settle in a little bit. We've had some technical difficulties getting on air, but we are here and we're alive and we're moving forward. So let's see, you said we were talking about the misconceptions of marriage, right? So let's just give a little bit of a warm up before we jump all the way into the deep end. So you meet Mr. Wonderful, you meet Mrs. Wonderful, you fall madly in love with them. They propose a question and you say, oh yes, be still my beating heart, and we're ready to get married and walk down the aisle. And what are the top 10 complaints about marriage? So one of them you stated was lack of respect. Talk to us. But here's what I want to touch on, though. I want to talk about lack of respect on both sides of the aisle, because often we only talk about it from the woman disrespecting the man. So talk to us about lack of respect.
Okay, you want to start?
Well, lack of respect is, I looked up the word lack of respect.
Mm-hmm.
It says a feeling of admiration for someone, or valuable, or consideration. So, and many times you find a lack of respect. That tends to happen when you have infidelity or something like that, and then the other spouse has no respect for what the other one has to say, because that trust has been broken.
Wow.
That's sometimes, but in other cases, you just have lack of respect. Period. It doesn't have to be infidelity or anything.
Okay. All right. Adrienne, what do you have to say? What say ye?
A lot of times when there is, from a woman's point of view, a lack of respect for her husband or her man, even prior to marriage, a lot of times a lack of respect can go into a lot of different areas. And you can go back to, I would go back to when the way that I was raised. Mm-hmm. My mom raised us to respect and take care of the man.
Okay.
And whether or not that, and we were raised to respect our father.
Okay.
And I think it comes back starts at the root of the childhood, mm-hmm. of how you are raised and how that home is actually set up. My mom says, okay, no matter what condition your father is in, number one, he is still your father.
Right.
So you respect him. So in honest and openly speaking, my father was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. But he was still my father. And we were never still allowed to disrespect him because of the illness that he had.
Gotcha.
Now, when it comes down to when you're going to respect your husband, because I was raised, no matter how that position is, you respect him. You respect in things like you choose your words wisely. How you are addressing your spouse.
Gotcha.
What do you, your body language.
Right.
Body language can show disrespect. If they're trying to have a conversation with you and you're turning your body to the side, crossing your arms, or even doing something else while they're talking and not giving your undivided attention,
Right.
that's disrespectful.
True.
A lot of times you need to watch your tone
Okay.
overall and when you are addressing them. I know sometimes I can be very direct,
Right.
and my tone does change from when I am frustrated. So we just need to watch that tone. No, we're not going to always be smiley. Oh, everything is great, coming up roses. That is not reality.
Okay.
You're going to have frustrations, and still in whatever you do, show that respect to them in while you're speaking to them and while you're even listening to them.
So, one of the things that you said was you were brought up and you were taught no matter what your mom taught you, you show respect to your husband. You show respect to your father. And so that kind of prepared a really good foundation for you going into marriage. Let's talk to those listeners who are kind of like, well, I didn't have that. You know, I wasn't taught that, whether the father was in the home or not, or dad wasn't at home, so I wasn't taught that, or my father was in the home, but my mom kind of ran over him. And now I'm in a place where my husband's wanting me to respect him, and I'm kind of like, I'm struggling in that area. How do they repair that?
Well, if they're struggling in the area of, of being respectful, you have to kind of step back and evaluate yourself. You have to evaluate yourself, evaluate the situation. Because respect is giving over to someone.
Right.
So you need to pay attention to, that's something you're going to have to work on, self-teaching yourself.
Okay.
And if you know something makes him angry or frustrates him or anything like that, then you might want to stay away from that and respect that area. And even with my my husband, even when he lost his father,
Right.
there's I had to respect how he felt in that area. So respect is also giving some sensitivity.
That's really good.
So if you are sensitive to how they're feeling, you're going to respect them.
That's really good.
And respect that area and that space of their life.
So really what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is it eliminates the excuse of, I wasn't raised that way.
Totally eliminates it. Because we can always change a direction of our lives.
I love it.
Even examples that we set for our children growing up.
Right.
At the end of the day, you put in them, but you don't know what your results are going to be.
Right.
You're praying to God that what you put in them, that they are going to put that out later in their lives. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen.
Right.
Now, even though my mother taught us to be respectful, I could have just been a totally different child and was rude, talk to him any kind of way, say whatever I want to say when I felt like saying it. I didn't have to follow that
Right.
example that was set before me. I didn't have to follow that. So there's no excuse.
That's good.
Tune into that sensitivity. And one of the things that I follow my life by is I treat people the way I want to be treated. And if you follow kind of that golden rule within yourself, are you going to just treat them any kind of way and say anything to them because do you want them to do that to you? And that's overall in your whole life.
Okay. And so we're gonna kind of wrap up lack of respect and then segue into the next part of it. But what I want to talk to, I want you guys to talk to the spouse, whether male or female, who says, "But Adrienne, I am doing that. I am treating him or her the way that I want to be treated, and they still have no respect for me. They still are disrespectful towards my feelings. They're still, they're not I'm sensitive to them, but they're not sensitive to me." What advice would you give to the person who's in that predicament?
You need to open up your lines of communication.
That's good.
There needs to be a communication with that individual as to sometimes you have to sit down and really talk to them and get that intimate conversation going on what's going on with them. They may have some other areas that they're bringing into their relationships and baggage that hasn't been dealt with. And there's some other feelings going on with them. So you need to open up that line of communication. It's time to talk about it now.
Okay. Which actually leads us to our next topic about the biggest complaints about marriage is not listening to your spouse. So, and he's laughing. So I'm not sure KEPX, if this is a good thing or a bad thing. If we suddenly go off air, you may know why.
Well, it's actually a bad thing.
Okay, so let's talk to us about, and again, what I don't want to be is unfair or unjust in our approach in this.
Right.
So we want to talk on both sides of the aisle, because so often the stereotype is, well, women talk a whole lot because women talk so much, and the man doesn't listen. But there are times when women don't listen to their spouse's needs as well. So talk to us. So Kenneth, start off, and Adrienne, I want to hear the female perspective.
Well, I looked up the word listening, and it means to hear something with thoughtfulness.
Okay.
Or give consideration to what's being said.
Right.
So, when your spouse is speaking, well, you want to be listening to what they say. Like my wife was saying, body language says a lot. If I'm twisting and turning, I'm not listening to what you're saying. You want to be listening to what your spouse says. You want to have an attentive ear. That goes for husband and for wife. That goes for both, not just for one.
Okay.
Both spouses need to be listening. It's very critical that you listen, because nobody wants to be talking and not to be heard, especially a spouse.
Okay, so let's talk to us really quick before we segue over to Adrienne. Let's talk about how do we practice listening skills? Because if we haven't been good, and it's not so let me say this. Let me back up a little bit. One of the things that I've learned is that listening is a skill that needs to be developed. So what are some tips to actively listening?
Well, what we do...
No, just listening, and not just the white noise of Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah.
Well, what we have in our teaching and some of our classes, we have what we call, we mentioned this before, a listening stick. So whoever has the stick, that they're the ones that's able to talk. So you have to just listen. And you have to sharpen that skill. That's not something that just automatically comes. You have to sharpen your skills. In marriage, skills have to be sharpened. There's just things that have to be done. So and then you learn to listen. I mean, a lot of times that's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you haven't been doing it. Even now, sometimes for us, we have to back ourselves back, and say, well, hey, we got to, do what we teach. When we have a discussion or a disagreement, we have to pull ourselves back. We still have to deal with the same thing that everybody else deal with. So we but what we've learned is how to correct it, faster than what we used to. So, and that's critical, because you don't want to leave things, up in the air. That's just bad for marriages.
That's really good. So in using that listening stick, talk to the person who has the stick, who has to listen. Because sometimes people listen to point counterpoint, right? You made a point, okay, yeah, I got you, I got you. Oh, you mad about that? Oh, okay, I see. And it's not listening to hear. So Adrienne, talk to us about listening to hear and having those active listening skills while you got the stick and you have to listen.
Okay, one of the things that shows that you are listening to them is going back and repeating what they have said.
Okay.
Because sometimes you need to know that you've been heard.
Right.
And so one of the things is, what I thought I heard you say is this, or what I heard you say is this. And that gives that other person the affirmation of, you affirmed it, so they can affirm. If I'm saying something to Kenneth, he can say, well, this is what I thought I heard you say. And if that's not what it was, then I have the opportunity, no, hun, I was actually saying this.
Got it.
So that is letting him know and letting me know he's listening, and I know he's listening because he is trying to interpret what he has heard.
That's good.
Because what's going on in my mind and what might come out of my mouth may not be totally what went in his ear.
That's good.
So, affirming, this is what I thought I heard you say, and giving you the opportunity to correct it if necessary.
Okay.
And if not, you affirm, yes, that is what I'm saying. And then you can move to the next step. Therefore, I have been affirmed that I know I've been heard.
That's good. I think one of the things that's so important, not just in marriage, because I'm not touching that. Never been married. Touch you with a 10-foot pole. But one of the things that I do know in life, KEPX, is that as human beings, we want to be heard. It is such a vital desire for us to be heard, even if we're not agreed with.
Exactly.
I just want to know that you heard my point of view.
Exactly.
And so talk to the couples that are struggling because somebody's not being heard, because one person thinks the other person's point of view is stupid or petty or small, or you still mad about that? You haven't gotten over that yet? That's still bothering you? Talk to them about how to get through. And it ties back to what you were saying with the lack of respect. So blend the two together for us.
Okay, what we do is, and what we always suggest to couples, is that you sit down and you have your husband and wife meeting.
Okay.
And during this husband and wife meeting is a time for you both to express whatever situations are going on. And one of them, it doesn't always mean that are you going to resolve any issues, but you're giving them the respect of listening to what they have to say, affirming what they have said so that they have been heard. Will you be able to resolve it? Sometimes there's not things that need to be resolved. It just needs to be heard. So you're going to give that person that respect by affirming that you did hear what they said, and then you just move on from there. If it's an issue that needs to be resolved, then at that point you could affirm that you heard what they said,
right,
and this is what I think how we can resolve that issue. So you take that time out with one another, nobody else involved, just the two of you.
Right.
Having that intimate conversation to where you both are discussing and that communication line is wide open for the both of you.
I love it. I really do. And so one of the thoughts that came to my mind is, before we segue into our next point of discussion, talk about the benefits of practicing respect and the benefits of listening to the spouse. Because I can imagine if you guys, you're in a heated argument, right? Husband and wife are, and we sit down and we have this discussion, and now wife walks away feeling like, wow, he heard me. And he walks away feeling like, wow, she really heard what I had to say. Talk about the benefits that flow from.
Well, that is the benefit. The benefit is that you know that your spouse heard you.
Right.
And many times that calms you down, because many times you're thinking and anger builds when you're not being heard. So
Right.
if you're being heard, if you know that you're being heard, at least that kind of calms you. And there was a situation to where that we had. It was, I think, 3 or 4 days later I told her, I thought you said X, Y, Z. No, I didn't say that. So here we are thinking 3 or 4 days later that something was said that was not said, and we discussing that back and forth, and that's not even what was said.
Right.
So so it's critical that you hear what your spouse has to say.
Okay, that's really good.
And
Adrienne?
it also creates another level of intimacy.
Yes.
And it creates a level of intimacy which goes along with trust.
Right.
And it just gives you that more comfortable, warm feeling that, wow, we can move to the next step now because we got to that part of our intimacy in our relationship. So we're there. That communication line is open. So it gives you that real good comfort zone with that individual, which you should have. You need to have that intimate relationship with them. So those intimate talks, on whatever level they're on, they're very, very important. They're very, very, very important to create that intimacy and keep that closeness in your relationship.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Married couples, I hope you're taking notes. All right, so that kind of segues into, we're going to touch on talk to me and not at me. Whoo, hot button issue.
Yes.
So, oh my God, I just got the death look. I think I want to stay single, y'all.
It's not that bad.
It's not that bad.
So, what's the difference? First of all, for those who are listening who may not know the difference, let's just kind of break it down and then we'll build it back up. So, what is, from a man's perspective, what is talking at me versus talking to me? And let's talk about it from a woman's perspective so that we can address both the needs on both sides of the aisle.
Okay, I'll start with the woman's perspective. And talk to me. And that's where I go back to being respectful and listening to what I have to say and responding to me in a respectful way. Don't talk at me. Don't start yelling. Don't start raising your voice. Because you're not talking to me. You're talking at me.
Right.
And I'm not hearing that. If you're talking at me, I'm not hearing you.
Right.
There's not any listening or any hearing going on because the shutdown comes when the voice went up.
That's good.
So I didn't hear you, so you were just talking at me.
Right.
You might as well been at that wall,
Right.
talking at that wall because it's done.
Right.
But when you're talking to me, I'm in tune to that conversation that we're having. And I'm listening to you and you're listening to me. So, and if we're all talking on the same, if we're both talking on that same level, then we're okay. Like sometimes I get excited when I'm talking. So my husband has to know when I'm excited about what I'm saying, if there's some passion in that, or am I just yelling at him?
Right.
Did I just raise my voice out of excitement, or am I just yelling at you?
Gotcha.
Because if I'm raising it out of excitement, he's involved in that conversation. If I start raising it and I'm yelling at him, the conversation just ended.
Right.
So I was just talking at him. It went nowhere.
That's good.
So we just have to keep in mind that those tones of voices. Are we always perfect in those areas? Absolutely not.
Right.
It does happen. And I do have to remind him as well as he has to remind me.
Okay. So, what are some tips that you can give couples to start practicing? Because let's say we have a couple that they have a great relationship, but man, when they fight, it's like World War III is about to start. How can they practice respect, practice good communication, listening with one another, actively listening, and then when it comes to talking, making sure that they are talking to, not talking at? What are some tips?
One tip is to stay calm. I mean, you have to stay. If you don't stay calm, your voice is going to elevate. So, and you're going to start to get excited. So, if you can just stay calm, that's one of the key elements of, not talking at someone, but talking to them. And many times in counseling, we will run into situations, or we've heard situations to where that people come back and say in their counseling session, the counselor talked at them and not to them. And many times you can let your personal feeling get in there, and you can tend to talk at someone when it's something personal.
Right.
So if you, as far as the counseling goes, if you don't put your personal feeling in there, you tend to be able to talk to them and not at them.
Would you recommend, so let's say you have a couple who is very demonstrative, not physically, because it's not good to hit on either side of the aisle. Repeat after me. I will not hit my spouse. Okay, good. So now that we have that down, let's say you have a couple who's very dramatic and, they're yellers. Would you recommend that it's a good idea if they want to practice speaking, talking to and not at one another? Would you recommend that they go to a public place? Like, should we go and discuss our issues in public, or should we continue having them in private? How do we work through that to get to a place where we're talking to and not yelling at?
When you have explosive couples, is what I would say, and we've dealt with some of those explosive couples. One of the things that we do right off the bat is we set boundaries.
Okay. What are the boundaries?
Some of the boundaries are, one of the boundaries is you don't call each other out of your name.
Okay.
You address them, respect them, and address them by their name. I'm not going to call you something else. Okay. And then another one of the boundaries is number one, you control how you are responding to things. So you're going to take responsibility for your actions in the conversation.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you need to know if you have a tendency to yell, then you need to set that boundary and remind your own self by being responsible for you.
Gotcha.
We're not doing any yelling in this conversation. And this is why we encourage a husband and wife meeting, which is once a week. Because instead of discussing all of this stuff always during the week, when sometimes we're not always at our best. We've had a rough day at work, and then, oh God, I got to come home and discuss this. Otherwise, you can just make that list of the things that you need to discuss. And will you get through those lists? No. But at least it gives you some time to enjoy one another during the week. So one of the things is set boundaries. You set boundaries within yourselves, and you set boundaries within within your conversation with one another. How am I going to address you?
Gotcha.
And like I do tell some couples, especially young couples, there's certain times of the month where you just may not want to have a deep conversation with your wife. Because that may not be the right time of the month. If you start talking about a money issue, or you might get a disrespectful tone back because there's hormones going everywhere. So we're just going to be real. So you might want to change when you're going to have some of these conversations.
That makes a lot of sense.
So
that's really
set
good,
some
actually.
of those boundaries and be aware and be sensitive to one another.
Okay. All right.
And you want to stay away from cursing and name calling. I mean, you have a lot of, even in Christian situations, you have, when you get upset, you do have Christians cursing, but you want to stay away from that, because if, like you were talking about, if you're a yeller or someone that talks loud, that's going to be magnified 3 times if you're calling them out of their name or calling them names or cursing at them. It's going to be magnified 3 times. So you want to stay away from those things. You don't want, because you're not going to be heard.
That's good.
You're not going to be heard. You're going to, that just blows everything. It's gone, and you're going to have a shutdown. So
Right.
you want to stay away from that.
And I would think what would happen is, if I just think about it in terms of, if I'm having a conversation with someone else, right? Let's just say a friend, and the conversation takes a nasty turn, and now suddenly you're cursing at me. There comes a point where it's like, if you've pushed me into a corner, and I feel like I have to fight my way out.
Exactly.
There's no longer a point of reconciliation.
No.
There's no longer a point of let's peaceably. It's, oh no, you're going to go for the jugular. I'm going to go for the jugular too. So that actually makes it.
And you have to keep in mind that words have power.
Yeah.
Right.
Words have power. And once you put this out, whew,
That's so
some
true.
of it you can't take it back, and you've hurt the feelings, and you've done all of these things, and now you got to try and work on fixing the feelings and making them feel better, and avoid that.
Right.
Set the boundary
Right.
and don't go there. If one of you get angry, cut the conversation. It's okay.
Right.
It's okay. I'm upset. I think it's just best we just not talk about this right now. Let's address this later.
I'm so glad you said that. I want you to talk to the spouse, whether male or female, who won't let it drop. And I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend of mine who long time ago, one of her biggest complaints was when she said, I don't want to talk about this right now, because she could feel herself getting angry. And he would push the issue. And it was almost like this antagonization and push and push and push. And then finally, so now they're at like a full blown, I mean, Mount Vesuvius have erupted. Names are being thrown about. And I remember her saying to me, all of that could have been avoided had he just given me my space. So talk to the spouse who doesn't respect the other spouse's boundary line when they say, let's talk about this later because I can feel myself getting angry.
Well, you want to give them that respect and give them that space. I mean, because, like you said, nothing's good going to come out of us escalating out of control. You want to stay in control and stay calm. And if they don't want to talk about it, leave it for now, and come back to it later after you both calm down.
Right.
But don't press the issue. Don't press that button because, there's no telling what could happen.
Right.
So you don't want to press things. Not with that.
Adrienne?
Sometimes that just comes also too with maturity
Okay.
and knowing your spouse. That you're not going to continue to push those buttons.
Right.
Let's be mature about it. And let's be respectful. If you respect them, you're going and you respect that space that they're in right now, you're going to just back off and say, okay, fine, we'll just talk about it later.
Right.
There was a point in time in my life whereas, we're talking about it right now. And that's the way I felt about it. No, we're going to talk about it right now. But now, because of experiences of explosive things and words being said that you can't take back,
Oh, that's so good.
your experiences teaches you to just back up, respect their space, and leave it. So that you will not have to deal with those issues later. And some of us are still going to go through that. We're still going to do it and push those issues and push them. But you need to learn and be responsible for and be accountable for your behavior.
Right.
Be accountable for you.
Right.
Because now, if something comes out that you didn't like the way it came out, or something was said that, whoa, really? I didn't know that happened. You should have left it there where it is.
Right.
And so it comes with maturity with that individual and knowing your spouse, knowing your companion. This is even dealing with your children.
Right.
You can don't give them that space so that you're not yelling and screaming back and forth at one another and over crossing these boundaries on a regular basis, because that just keeps things festering.
Right.
And you don't want to do that.
That's real excellent advice. So we're going to talk about time management. Why is time management a complaint in marriage?
Well,
I saw a sigh and a big. I'm just going to narrate the body language, KEPX, so that you all understand.
Well, that's personal for us, so that's why you saw a sigh.
Yes.
That's personal. But I go back to what my father used to say: time stands still for no one. Or another saying, time has no sympathy for anyone. It's going to keep going regardless of what you do or what you don't do. Time, you can't stop that. But you have to be, in that case, you have to be willing to listen to advice on how to manage your time.
Okay.
You know, because maybe one spouse may be better at managing time than the other one. So, you know, you want to listen to the one that's better in that area. You know, because there are because I'm one that's in our relationship, I'm the one that managed time. You know, so and she's not really good at that. You know, so you know, but managing time is, you know, and many times when time is not managed, I mean, it creates a problem in the marriage. You know,
So-
you have a lot of arguing back and forth when time is not managed. You know, and you have, you know, bickering and say, well, you're giving more time to this and not enough time to that, and so you know, it's a big issue.
Okay.
I look at routine.
Okay. All right.
So routines are sometimes a little bit different. And I will say in when there is a working husband and wife, both are working. So your routines are going to sometimes differ.
Right.
So when it comes into those where my husband is more on a routine, I'm not more of a routine person. Some people are more routine. You can probably tell the time by them.
Wow.
However, I don't live life for the moment either, but I'm not as in a routine as he is.
Right.
I'm not a morning person, so I don't like to get up early in the morning. Even though I have to get up and go to work, I'm still not a morning person.
Right.
And when I shut down at night because of a high stressful job, I shut down. So no, my clothes are not ready for work the next day. That's not part of my routine. Whereas he has everything is set up. He gets up at a certain time. He goes to work. He goes to the gym at a certain time. He eats dinner at a certain time. He is a routine person. I can tell I can tell time by what he's going to do, step by step. He can't do that with me because I might be here or I might be there. So sometimes time management really is important.
Right.
You really do. Those are the differences, and this is where he has to help me balance.
And so I'm actually, one of the reasons why I'm laughing is I'm so glad that you said that, because these are the practical day-to-day, minute-by-minute parts of marriage I think a lot of times we don't think about.
Right.
You know, you have one person who is very structured and very organized, and you know, I already know I'm the free spirit. You know, whoever my husband is, God bless him, you know, I'm the free spirit. It's kind of like, oh, let's see what's over there.
Exactly. And there is nothing wrong with being that way because he balances that out.
Right.
I'm usually, honey, whatever you want to do is fine. But can't you ever decide that? No, it's fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. And really, it really is fine.
Right.
I'm a little bit free-spirited about
Right.
things. I don't lighthearted in situations like that. But making time to spend that time with them
Right.
and just taking the time out because I can work from home, even some evenings working from home, shutting that computer down
Right.
and giving him that time. So I need to manage my time as what I'm giving to him. And then he, like I said, he's very routine. So sometimes I have to align myself within his routine
Right.
and manage my time better for him.
Right.
And we always have to make sure we keep that in mind in balancing those things in our relationships.
I think that's really, I loved what you said, that you make those adjustments for him. And it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about showing respect. So in your respect and your sensitivity towards your husband, it's like, okay, well, I know he's structured. I know I'm not structured. So I'm going to make sure that I make those adjustments. So now that we've addressed that side of the aisle, we want to go over here and address this side of the aisle because we want to be fair and balanced, right? So how do you, as a structured person, accommodate the fact that she is a free spirit and that, you know, unlike you, she's, depending on the day, she may not have her clothes picked out the next day, and breakfast may not be at 6 this morning. It might be in the car and it on the way to work.
Well, what I do is that I will go into an area and structure it for her. Because I know many times she has a high stress job, and when she gets home she shuts down.
Right.
So then I have to go and kind of structure things for her. But then she needs to allow me to structure the things for her that she cannot or don't have the mental capability at that time to structure.
Okay.
So she has to allow me. So I will have dinner at a certain time. And even with young people, with your children, set a time that you have with your children, and then set a time for your spouse. Probably earlier in the evening will be for your children, then later for your spouse. But
Right.
but you have to be able to organize time, because, like I said from the beginning, time has no sympathy. It's not going to stop. It's
Right.
going to keep rolling, and if you don't get everything structured in there, the night will be gone, and the next day will be there.
Okay.
So, and you're still not structured or have everything together. So then you're scattered. So you want to be able to structure your time. It's really critical, because we hear that many times in our counseling. Time management. It's a problem.
Right.
But if one is good at it, you allow them to do that. Because they can do that. God has given them that ability. So you come in behind them and allow them to do what God has anointed them to do. You may not be good in that area, but allow them to help you and guide you through that time.
I think that's really wonderful, but here's what I want to touch on, though. I want to talk about, because we know that she's a free spirit and you're structured. So in those times when she needs to be a free spirit, because truthfully, the free spirit will balance you out, because life isn't always,
Right.
as much as time is unsympathetic, life is also unsympathetic in the fact that it's like, well, this is what's going to happen right now. And so it's going to throw your little schedule off course. So how do you accommodate her in those times when the free spirit in her is kind of bringing out maybe the best in you?
Well, I will have a space of time set up for her free spirit. So that's how you work that.
He kind of rolls with it.
You got 2 hours.
Okay.
Here's 2 hours for her free spirit. So whatever she wants to, or whatever she comes up with, here's 2 hours right here. We can do whatever you come up with. But this time is structured though. It's right in the time frame. So hey, but there's ways of working around things. But that's I have a certain time set up for hey. If that's what you want to do, well, we can go that direction. But it's in a time frame, though. Still, it's in a time frame.
He's very good with just rolling with it.
Okay.
And in that he knows I'm not going to get up early enough in the morning to fix breakfast. He will come home, he fixes breakfast. My breakfast is in my hand while I'm walking out the door. He just rolls with it. And I think that just kind of creates the balance for both of us, so that I'm not getting all stressed out because I'm free spirited,
Right.
and he's not getting stressed out because he is more structured and stays within his routine.
Okay.
I respect his space. Like I said, sometimes I'll give over into that routine for him. And when it comes with me, he knows it's easy, just roll with it.
Right.
And there's not a problem.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. We're going to segue into the next one, which is intimacy. And actually, we're going to do next month. We're going to pick up with next month with part 2 of the top 10 complaints in marriage. So we are going to close out and probably pick up next month. So make sure you tune in. And we're going to talk about intimacy. So, first and foremost, you hear that word and immediately people go to the physical act of intimacy. So we want you to talk to us about the multifaceted aspects of intimacy, because it goes beyond just sex. So let's start there.
Okay. Intimacy, it goes way beyond just sex.
Right.
Intimacy is the closeness that you have with that individual.
Right.
You think about your closeness that you have with God.
Right.
Whereas when you pray, you're telling God everything, and you can express it the way that you need to express it, and you know that God is receiving it that way. That's the way it is in an intimate relationship with your spouse.
Right.
And intimacy is allowing them to see those vulnerable points of you, trusting them with what your heart is. And that's where intimacy is. And through that level of intimacy in that level of intimacy is also communication.
Right.
Communication just plays a big piece in your whole aspect of your relationship.
Right.
So intimacy, as T.D. Jakes would always say, and I love it, into me you see.
Right.
You see me. And so, and being able to be open with them and create that closeness with them, and you're going to only be able to do that through communication. And another thing that creates intimacy within you is when you're praying together. That creates another level of intimacy, because you as one are going to God as one.
Right.
And so that creates intimacy as well. So that's one of the things of it. It's just being together and being open and trusting that person with your heart.
I love it.
To me, intimacy is closeness or togetherness.
Right.
You know, because you are together, you're one. You know, so, you know, touching and agreeing, I mean, to me, that brings intimacy. And another word is belong to. You know, your spouse belongs to you.
Right.
You know, so
right.
that brings intimacy into the relationship. You know, knowing that they belong to you, and tenderness, caring, you know, touch and feel. I mean, I have to do better in that area.
Right.
You know, sometimes you know, as your day goes and as your month goes, as your year goes, you know, you tend to kind of drift away from that. But, you know, you still have to get back to that, you know, and it's very important and critical in your relationship, in your marriage, you know, to have some kind of intimacy, you know, because many times we counsel and there's no intimacy. And most times you hear the woman complain of that. Very rarely hear the men complain of that, you know, but that's a woman, you know, she needs to be touched, she needs to be heard, she needs to be close to, you know, she needs to be hugged, she needs to be touched. I mean, that's what she needs.
Okay.
Intimacy. And
So-
it's not always the bedroom. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Actually, what I want to do is I kind of want to segue to that as we get ready to close, and we'll pick up again. We'll pick up with intimacy next month. So we're going to continue this series. So we have the emotional intimacy, and I'm being heard, and you know, the friendship is deepening, and all that stuff is being created. And we have the spiritual intimacy because we are reading the Word of God together, and we're praying together, and we're discussing it together. And now that third component, the threefold cord, you know, it makes me think of a scripture where the Bible says, defraud not one another.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Like,
That's right.
you as a wife, you can't say my body belongs to me, because
That's
like you
right.
said, intimacy is about belonging.
Right.
So now you no longer belong to your spouse. You no longer belong to yourself. You belong to your spouse on both sides of the aisle. So let's talk about what is the importance, how important is physical intimacy to marriage?
Physical intimacy is extremely important,
Okay.
because that is what is the ultimate of the expression of everything else.
That's good.
That's the final expression
Right.
of with everything else that's intimate in your relationship. That's your full expression of how you really feel about that person, and you're giving all of it at that point in time. And that is why the Bible speaks about not fornicating,
Right.
because that you are really putting yourself entwining yourself as one with that person.
Right.
And that's really not your person.
Right.
That's not what it is supposed to be. So that's why the Bible speaks so heavily about fornication,
Right.
because when you're connecting that way, it is so connective,
Right.
and can mess you up emotionally.
Right.
So that's why it's left to when you are married.
Right.
And that's why you wait
Right.
for when you are married, because that's the ultimate feeling. Those are the ultimate expressions that you're giving to one another.
I love it. Absolutely love it. I agree 100%. Beautiful.
Yes, when you're intimate with someone else, I mean, you're breaking the bond that God has set up
Yes.
with the oneness.
Right.
So now it's 3 people into an area that is only supposed to be 2. So and the togetherness, you break the togetherness
Right.
when you bring someone else in. So, but intimacy between the 2 is critical. You have to have that intimacy, because you don't want your spouse, male or female, going out looking for that someplace else.
Right.
If they're not getting it in the marriage, you tend to look for it elsewhere, and you don't want that, on the male or female side, so you want to be able to have that intimacy, that closeness, that belonging to, that togetherness in your marriage.
That's right, because otherwise, as I heard someone describe it to me once, you become roommates. You're nothing more than kind of like glorified roommates if that component isn't in the marriage.
Exactly.
So we hope, KEPX audience, that you have been blessed by what you've heard today. We are definitely going to continue with part 2 of the top 10 complaints in marriage next week with Kenneth and Adrienne Neers of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries. We're so grateful for this amazing topic that they gave us, and we hope that you enjoyed everything that you heard, and we ask that you would tune in again next Saturday at 4 p.m. for another installment of the Simone Edwards Show. We want you to know that if your marriage is doing great, we hope that you heard tips today to keep it great. And if you're in those rocky stages, just hang in there, have faith in God, know that He is still in charge, know that He can turn it around, know that it will get better, the love will return. And sometimes the tests and trials of life just serve to make the love stronger if you just hang in there. So we want to encourage you, hang in there. It's going to get better, and we will see you next week.